Two planes are on the same runway in heavy fog, and neither crew can see clearly what the other is doing. One of them is lined up at the far end, ready to depart. The other is still on the runway ahead, moving forward slowly, trying to leave at the third exit it was told to take. The captain in the aircraft at the back believes he has clearance for takeoff. He hears part of a transmission from the control tower. The words overlap with another voice. The message is not clean, it is not explicit. But in his mind, it is enough. He pushes the throttles forward. This is the decision that kills 583 people. The engines rise to full power and the aircraft begins accelerating down the runway. A fully loaded 747 does not move gently once thrust is set. It gathers speed quickly, and once it does, stopping it requires distance that disappears fast. Ahead of it, another 747 is still rolling forward through thick fog, searching for a turn that is hard to see from cockpit height. The runway markings fade in and out. The centerline lights appear and disappear. The crew believes they still have time. They reduce speed slightly and continue scanning for the exit. Inside that aircraft, passengers feel a vibration through the floor that does not match their own engine setting. It begins as a low tremor and then grows stronger. A few people look up from their seats. Some glance toward the rear of the cabin without understanding what they are sensing. In the accelerating cockpit behind them, there is uncertainty for a moment. The first officer questions the wording of the transmission. The captain responds with confidence. He believes clearance has been given. He believes the runway is clear. He continues accelerating. The runway ahead is not clear. Speed builds. The aircraft passes through decision speeds. At certain points during a takeoff roll, the options narrow. Rejecting takeoff after too much speed has built can mean running off the runway. Continuing means trusting that the runway is clear. The captain continues. The aircraft ahead is still on the runway. Through the fog, distance is deceptive. Shapes form late. Depth is distorted. The accelerating crew cannot yet see the full outline of the aircraft in front of them. Inside the aircraft at the front, the crew is still focused on finding the third exit. They are not aware of how fast the other 747 is closing the gap behind them. They expect that departure will begin only after they have cleared. They continue moving forward. In the cockpit of the accelerating aircraft, the runway lights begin to blur past. The aircraft is heavy with fuel for a long international flight. Stopping distance grows with every second. Then, through the fog, a dark mass appears ahead. It is closer than it should be. There is no time left to slow down enough to avoid it on the ground. The captain pulls back on the control column earlier than normal. He tries to lift the aircraft into the air before reaching the other plane. The nose rises. The front wheels leave the runway, but the aircraft is not high enough. The main landing gear and engines strike the upper fuselage of the aircraft still on the runway. The impact tears open the top of the cabin behind the wing. Metal rips through rows of seats. Fuel spills instantly and ignites. The accelerating aircraft continues forward briefly, partly airborne, before crashing back down onto the runway and erupting into a massive explosion. Both aircraft are burning within seconds. Inside the aircraft that was still taxiing, the rear cabin fills with flame almost immediately. The roof has been ripped open. Smoke pours down into the aisle and spreads quickly toward the front. Passengers are thrown against armrests and seat backs. Overhead, bins break loose. Bags fall into the aisle. The lights flicker, and then sections of the cabin go dark. Flight attendants begin shouting for evacuation. Their voices are steady, but urgent. Some passengers freeze in place. Others stand immediately. Overwing exits are opened, People climb onto the wing and drop to the runway below. Some slip. Some help strangers to their feet. Some run as far as they can from the fire. Others escape through the torn opening in the fuselage where the roof has been ripped away. Behind them, the other aircraft is completely engulfed in flame. There are no survivors on that plane. On the forward aircraft, the front section remains intact long enough for some passengers to escape through the forward doors. Fire spreads quickly toward them. 61 people survive from that aircraft. 583 people do not. The collision itself lasts less than a minute. The mistake that caused it takes seconds. Earlier that day, flights had been diverted to this airport after an explosion closed another one. The airport was not designed for that level of traffic. Wide-body aircraft were parked wherever space was available. Crews were required to use the runway itself to reposition before departure. The aircraft that attempted takeoff taxied to the far end of the runway and turned around to line up. The aircraft ahead had been instructed to leave the runway at the third exit before departure began. Radio transmissions overlapped at a critical moment. The controller issued route instructions. The departing crew believed they heard takeoff clearance. The wording was not explicit. The confirmation was incomplete. The first officer hesitated. The captain continued. There was no surface radar to show aircraft positions in heavy fog. Controllers could not see both aircraft on the runway in real time. They relied on radio communication and pilot reports. The fog limited visual confirmation. By the time the accelerating crew saw the aircraft ahead clearly, they were already moving too fast to stop safely. The attempt to lift early was a last-second effort to avoid collision. It failed by meters. Investigators later reconstructed the final minute in detail. They reviewed cockpit voice recorders. They analyzed flight data. They measured acceleration rates and runway distance remaining at the moment rotation began. They determined that the captain believed he was cleared. He was not. The disaster was not caused by mechanical failure. It was not caused by engine malfunction. It was caused by assumption under pressure and a decision made without full confirmation. After this crash, aviation procedures changed worldwide. Radio phraseology was standardized so that takeoff clearance had to be explicit and unmistakable. Controllers were trained to avoid ambiguous wording. Pilots were trained to challenge decisions inside the cockpit more assertively. Surface movement radar systems were installed at major airports to monitor runway occupancy, even in low visibility. All of those changes came from one runway in Tenerife, 2 aircraft, 1 misunderstood transmission, 1 irreversible decision. 583 lives ended on March 27, 1977. By morning, the smoke had lifted. The runway was cleared. The consequences of that decision remain in aviation procedures around the world today.